Hey guys, welcome back. Today we're out at the range with a couple of firearms from the Cold War era. This is not a complete list of Cold War era firearms, but these are just a couple that I find particularly interesting and are available on the US market, or at least were, but they're still available in many cases as used firearms if you want to pay, collector's prices on places like Gunbroker. And so the Cold War, what was that? Well, for some of you guys that weren't alive during the Cold War, it was a period of time that spanned between the end of World War II in 1945 until the early 1990s. You had a group of nations called the Warsaw Pact nations, which were opposed to us and our NATO alliance or allies. And so from that entire period, a lot of weapons were developed for use in a possible European conflict with the Soviet Union and its satellite states. So this video is going to talk about, again, a couple of rifles from that era that are currently available on the US market, again, either used or in one case brand new still. And yeah, if this is a popular series or a topic, I'll continue to do a few more videos, at least until I run out of Cold War era firearms to talk about. So we're going to start off with this Beretta AR-70. It originates in Italy, and we'll talk a little bit more about this rifle here in a minute, but this is easily one of my favorite Cold War era firearms. It's beautiful, it's elegant, and extremely well made. All right, we're going to fire off our first few rounds of the day, and then we'll jump right into the video, guys. Let's get started. All right, such a beautiful piece of machinery. Let's take a closer look and take a closer look at a couple of other rifles as well. We are 100% viewer supported through Patreon, and there is a link down below if you'd like to support us in our efforts to bring you the best, most unbiased information that we possibly can. Another great way to support us is to swing by our Forged from Freedom t-shirt store and pick up one of our new t-shirts, like this new CNN shirt. And again, there's a link down below, and that directly supports us here at the Military Arms Channel. Before the Second World War, most nations manufactured rifles the old-fashioned way. And what's that? Well, you take steel, you machine it, you put it in wood furniture. During the Second World War, we saw a very fast evolution of small arms for the infantry soldier. The Germans had a lot to do with that. And one of the developments that came out of that era would be the use of stamped sheet metal components that would both expedite the production of small arms and reduce the cost of their production. The STG-44 is an example of that. The AR-70 made use of that technology. We see that it has a sheet metal receiver with a bunch of resistance welds throughout that hold it all together. But despite being very cost effective in how it's manufactured with the sheet metal components, it's still typical Italian quality. It's extremely well made. All the components fit very nicely together, and the bolt operates and it feels like it's on ball bearings. It's just really, really silky smooth. So unlike many of the stamped guns that you would find, like the Sten gun or the M3 grease gun, which were very cheap in appearance and feel, the Beretta is the exact opposite of that. Think of the HK91 or HK93, another stamped rifle series that made the guns, or the Germans made the guns feel extremely well made and robust, despite the fact they were manufactured using stamped sheet metal components. This rifle was development started in the 1960s, and SIG and Beretta worked collaboratively for about 5 years trying to build a rifle together that they would both be able to manufacture and sell. That relationship fell apart, and from that joint relationship, we saw two different rifles being developed. The AR-70 in Italy and the SIG 540 and later SIG 550 rifles were the output of that collaborative effort. And that's why you'll see some visual similarities between the two guns. This looks a lot like a SIG 550 or 540 rifle. And they also make use of stamped sheet metal components. So despite their outward appearance being very similar, functionally and how they're put together, they're still quite different. Some of the things that are similar, though, is that they both use a rotating bolt, very similar to the M1 Garand or the AK-47. Both have pistons in the gas tubes, which have the recoil spring around the gas piston. This rifle does, and the SIG does as well. And they both borrow pretty extensively from the AK in terms of how they operate. We have on the 70 version a big flapper release. It's a rock and lock AK style magazine, has a rotating bolt similar to an AK. This gun's also a little bit different in that here in the front, we have a gas block that has an elevation adjustable front sight. But on the civilian version of the AR-70, which was imported before the '89 ban, they took the grenade launching capabilities off of it. You would, on the military version of the rifle, which was adopted by Italian forces as the AR-70-90 in 1990, which would be a variant of this. But this rifle had grenade launching capability, so it'd have a flip up. Think of a Yugo SKS as an example. You have a flip up grenade sight, which would then shut the gas off to the gun. And then you have the remnants of a grenade launching ring here. The reason this remains, even though they've taken the gas cutoff tool or device off of the block, the reason you still have this here missing its piston rings for the NATO grenade, standard rifle grenade, is because this sleeve on the front is part of the disassembly of the gun. So you would push this little lever in and this unscrews. And that's part of the maintenance capabilities of the gun. When you unscrew this, this whole gas block will pull off the barrel, which is underneath, and then you can take your gas system apart for maintenance. Back here we have a fixed reciprocating charging handle. Very smooth operation, but again, very AK-like. On top, we have the facilities on this one. Here's a port cover, by the way, that's reminiscent of the AR-180. But you have a port cover there you have on top here, and this would be a later variant that has an optics mount, which is proprietary. Now, some of the earlier guns that would have been brought in would not have this capability, and the rear sight on this has been simplified. On other versions, you would find a drum over here that you could rotate for elevation, which would raise and lower your rear aperture sight. That's been deleted. Now you can adjust windage over here with a tool or flathead. And now we have a simple flip aperture sight, very similar to the M16. Beretta wanted to license the M16 and manufacture it, but Colt said no, which is why they went ahead and developed this rifle. So you start to see, as this gun develops, it takes on AR-15-like capabilities, optics mount capabilities. AR-15 had a hole drilled through the carrying handle so you could mount optics on it. They did that to this. They made a rear sight very similar to the AR-15. And so even though this rifle was primarily used by police and forces, special forces, it wasn't really used by the Italian military in this configuration. The Italian military continued to use the BM-59 rifle. It wouldn't be until 1990 that they would adopt a variation of this for primary infantry use, and that version had a number of different changes from this rifle. It had a carrying handle on it like an M16, had different ways to mount optics, and it had rearranged and adjusted furniture. Those were never imported, so I don't have one to show you. Also, the AR-70-90 would make use of standard M16 magazines. The AR-70, the earlier version I have here in my hands, uses its own proprietary magazine, which is a typical AK style mag that rocks and locks. So you put the toe in first and then rock it back and it locks into place. And here is your magazine release right by my index finger. The fire controls on the AR-70 are a little bit different. They're kind of backwards. We do have a ping pong paddle here for a bolt release. It does lock open on the last shot fired. And then we have a fire control selector right here on the left-hand side of the receiver, lower receiver. Down is safe. It's opposite of what we are used to with the M16. Down is safe, up is fire. So it's counterintuitive to those of us used to the AR-15 M16 family of firearms. All right, so let's go ahead and charge the weapon. I have the magazine inserted, the weapon's on safe. I pull the bolt to the rear. The top cover, I'm sorry, not the port cover pops open by itself, release it, and it's ready to fire. All right, put her on fire, and we only have about 20 rounds loaded into the 30-round magazine. There you see the bolt lock open. You can remove the magazine. I only have one magazine with me here, and then insert a fresh magazine. Hit the bolt release, like the M16, and it reloads, and repeat as necessary. So, a beautiful Cold War era rifle. and one that is easily one of my favorite. Extremely well made, very elegant, accurate, and easy to use. All right, this rifle is the SETME L. This rifle was developed after the Model 58 or the Model C that we know it as here in the United States, and I've featured that rifle here on the Military Arms channel before. The Spaniards developed the technology of the roller delayed action with the assistance of some Germans that left Germany after the Second World War. So once again, we see the extensive use of sheet metal in the construction of the SETME L, and this rifle was starting to be worked on right around 1981, and in 1984 it underwent trials, and in 1987 the Spaniards started taking shipments of the SETME L rifles into the Spanish military. Then later in 1991 this rifle would be replaced in service by a licensed copy of the G36. Now here's the irony of that. So the SETME Model 58 or the SETME Model C is a rifle that was developed in Spain and licensed to the Germans, who produced it as the G3. It didn't originate in Germany. Well, it kind of did and it kind of didn't, but the Spaniards licensed it to Germany. Then in 1991, the Germans licensed the G36 to the Spaniards to replace this rifle. Kind of an interesting footnote in Cold War history. So the rifle, as you see it here, is currently available for $15.99 on the US market. You can find these rifles at coppercustom.com. And of the 3 rifles we brought out this afternoon, this is the only rifle that is currently available on the US market. The rifles that are being built now by Hill and Mack Gun Works are built on virgin kits. They were unissued kits, and so the rifles are really nice. They are originally this green. This is a green Cerakote now, but it looks just like the original version. So what are some of the features of the SETME L? Well, first of all, it fires from a standard military M16 style magazine. They had their own, which I have here, which were made out of stamped steel, but the magazine we just fired out of the rifle was a standard aluminum bodied Stanag magazine used by US military and other NATO forces. So it does use that standard magazine. We have a magazine release here right by the index finger. And then back here, we have just kind of, it's not really polymer. It's like a glass-filled resin of some sort. The stocks are very hard. It's some sort of a polymer-esque material. I don't know what it's actually made of. You can actually see the flashing here from the seam where they put the parts together and used heat probably to seal them up. But yeah, it's really thick and hard. It's almost like Bakelite in texture. But anyway, you can see that the rifle is really very similar to the HK93 or HK33, right down to how the gun works. I mean, this is a roller delayed system. If you look at the internal parts, it looks just like a German HK93. But this gun is definitely more angular than the more rounded HK93. But you have the 2 pins here in the rear that you push these out and store them here in the stocks. Butt cap pulls off. You take the selector lever out, which is here on the other side. Take the selector lever out, the pistol grip will come out, the stock will come off, the pistol grip and fire control will come out, and then you can pull the bolt and carrier out by pulling the charging handle to the rear. It all pops out the rear of the rifle just like an HK93 would. And again, the rollers and stuff inside look just like an HK93. Up here on top, we have a very simple sight system. It has a big gaudy tower, but there's a couple of things going on here. First of all, we have an aperture sight, which is an L-type aperture like would be found on the M16 and M16A1 and A2 families of rifles. You can flip it from 200 to 400 meters, and it's windage adjustable with a tool, very reminiscent of the M16A1. This also acts as a sight mount. You'll see a little dimple right here in the back of the sight tower, and there's a ledge on the front, a little pin-like thing that goes across here. You can put a sight on, tighten it down, and there's an optics mount for this. I've never seen one in the US, but I'm sure they can be found. But that's part of what this tower is a mounting system for an optic. Then this button right here is actually a bolt hold and a bolt release. So I can pull the bolt to the rear, push this button across, and then push the charging handle back forward, which is non-reciprocating, and that locks the bolt to the rear. The gun does not lock open on last shot fired. So now you can put a magazine into the gun, and then on the other side of the tower, you have the other side of the button, push that, and that drops the bolt home, chambering around. With the HK series of rifles, you would pull the charging handle to the rear and rotate it up into a locking recess here on the cocking tube. Here on the Set-Me-L, it's back here on the rear sight tower. Moving forward, we have a square cocking tube versus an HK style, which would be round. And then we have a pin here holding the front, or holding the fore end on the gun. On top, we have a sight block, and then inside you'll see a very M16-esque looking front sight, which is adjustable for elevation. And then here on the front of the sight tower is the facilities for a bayonet, which Copper has some of these bayonets available as well. They don't ship with the rifle, but a few are available. But the bayonet would go over the barrel and then lock in place right there. So it's inverted just like it would be on the HK family of weapons and the Set-Me Model C. The bayonet goes on top of the barrel instead of the bottom side that we're used to seeing. Then we have a 3-prong flash hider, and here we have rings for a 22 millimeter rifle grenade that would be used in conjunction with a grenade launching blank. The sling is leather and is original to the rifle. You can see the sling mounting points in the rear, very much like what you would see on a H&K, and a clip here in the front. Here's your simple fire controls. You have safe up, fire. We don't have the facilities for full auto, but it would go down one more click if this were a full auto capable rifle. So it's a very soft shooting gun. It shoots really, really nicely, and the recoil impulse is nice and muted. And then if you take a look at some of the spent cases, if I can find one around here, the spent cases have flutes on them because the chamber on this rifle is fluted as well. So it have very pronounced flutes on the spent cases. And just like the roller delayed systems before it, it's an extremely cruddy, nasty, dirty rifle to shoot, but still I found them to be fairly reliable and really, really fun and pleasant to shoot. The recoil impulse, again, is very muted. It doesn't feel like the bolt slams into the rear of the stock like it does on other rifles. It has a very large buffering system back here, and it just shoots very, very, very smooth. But again, of all the rifles out here, this is the only one that's currently in production and available over at Copper Custom. In 1981, the South Korean military was looking for a new submachine gun to replace the M3. They were at the time using licensed built M16A1 variants, but they wanted something that had more firepower than the M3 and could replace it in military service. So the K1 came into existence, which this is the semi-automatic version of that was imported into the United States before 1989. The K1 uses a direct gas impingement system, and it fires .223 or .556. This rifle is still classified as a submachine gun to the South Korean military. In 1984, the rifle variant of this would enter military service to replace the M16A1s, and it currently uses a AK-47 style operation, a long stroke gas piston, whereas this one is direct gas impingement like the M16 family of firearms. So while they're similar, they have a similar locking mechanism and things like that, similar trigger mechanism, the gas operation of the two guns are worlds apart. But this one, being a direct gas impingement gun, is very lightweight and handy. Of course, it has a 16-inch barrel. For our stupid US laws, we can't have the proper short barrel on this thing. The original version of the gun entered military service, like I said, 1981, and it had some problems. It had some problems with the gun having too much recoil because it was so lightweight, and the stock on it would fail. It was very flimsy and couldn't hold up to the recoil forces of the .556, which is saying something because .556 doesn't generate a whole lot of energy in terms of recoil force. But the gun is very, very similar to the AR-15, right down to the fact that it camshells open like that. You have a AR-15 type fire control unit on the inside. But aside from the fact that it uses a lockup system like the AR-15 and a trigger system like the AR-15, none of the components between the guns interchange, that being this in the M16 rifle. But the stock was improved. The stock can be collapsed by pushing this button right here and then collapsing the stock, pushing it forward. And that would be fully collapsed. To extend it, you would just push the button and pull, and the stock would extend. It has 2 positions, and you can see the wire stock is quite long and moves around quite a bit. The rear sight is very M16-ish again. We have a drum here using M16 sight tool to adjust for windage. We have a peep aperture, and then you can flip it up to a combat aperture, which is a very broad open aperture. This is your takedown button that causes you push this forward with your thumb, and then it camshells open. It has a bolt very much like the M16 and a fixed charging handle that reciprocates with the cycling of the gun. Moving forward, again, we have a front sight post, which looks like it's taken right off an AR-15 M16, has the up marking and everything, and uses a standard, both of these front and rear sights use standard M16 sight adjustment tools. Then you have your sling swivels, one over here on the side of the receiver that rotates, but is limited in rotation. And then you have one here on the front sight/gas block. You do have a ping pong paddle of sorts right here because the gun does lock open on the last shot fired. And so you can put a bolts lock to the rear, put a fresh magazine in, hit the button, and it charges the rifle. The selector lever is very goofy. There's fire, and it makes a full rotation around to semi. I guess it's a half rotation. And then you have this very unique style pistol grip. So the gun is actually one of my favorites. I did a video dedicated to the K2 rifle, which again uses a long stroke gas piston like the AK. And this is the first time I think this gun's ever appeared in video here on the Military Arms channel. The mag release is right there. So you take the magazine, insert it into the rifle, pull the charging handle to the rear, let it go, rotate from safe all the way around to semi, and fire. Like I said earlier in the video, the SETME Model L is the only rifle in this video that's still currently available on the US market, and it's available through Copper Custom. This is my rifle. This is a couple of years old. Here's an example of what the new rifles look like. Again, they're made using a non-issued parts kit. It's actually sealed in this plastic. So you'll get the rifle, a magazine, which is a Brownells magazine, and then an owner's manual. Again, they're $15.99 over at Copper Custom. You can also pick up a bayonet from Copper, and this is an example of some of the military bayonets that are available for the rifle, which kind of completes the rifle if you're a collector of military firearms like I am. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And if you did, and you'd like to see more videos like this talking about Cold War era rifles that came after the Second World War, just post down below in the comments section, and we'll put another video together, and I'll grab some more relics out of my gun room. If you'd like to support us, a great way to do that, guys, is to swing by Copper Custom and check the store out. It is our online store. Also, don't forget, guys, we are Twitch gamers. So if you'd like to join us in a live stream, if you're a Patreon supporter, send me a note, let me know you're a Patreon. I'll check, add you as a friend on the PSN network, and you can play in a game with us that we live stream. We greatly appreciate the 11 years of support, and we'll talk to you guys soon. That thing is so ridiculously smooth. Very, very cool rifle. I love the Cold War stuff. Talk to you guys soon.